Welcome back in. Let's talk about the New York Jets, what they were in 2019 on defense, and what they might can do to get better on defense in 2020 during the offseason. I want to start with their numbers right here. It's not a stretch to say that the New York Jets were a top 10 defense this year, and I think that they can be that next year. I don't see any reason why they can't be better next year. Now, when you start to look at some of the numbers, you could argue whether or not they were a legit top 10 defense this year, but when you look at the yards per game, total yards per game, they checked in at number 7. Okay, so from a yards per game standpoint, which is how the NFL measures defenses and offenses, they checked in at number 7. They had an outstanding season defensively, did not give up a ton of yards. Most of that, strength-wise, comes from the rushing yards per game. Okay, they were number 2 in the league overall, had an outstanding year against the run, really stopped the run, did an excellent job of that with the defensive line, and then with some of the commitments and the schemes, the way they wanted to attack stopping the run. You revert back to the passing yards per game, though, they're number 17. So they're middle of the league with that. And we'll talk about why that was or may not have been. But when you look at the Jets overall, they're number 17 in points per game. So that starts to scale you back. Whenever you see that the yardage is low, but the points per game is high, you start to realize, okay, maybe this defense, wasn't as great as that right there. Number 7 might indicate. So I think this was a good, solid defense this year. I really kind of hesitate to call them a true top 10 defense this year, but when you look at who they got coming back and what they can do in the offseason, I think there's a very good chance that the Jets could be a legit top 10 defense next year and be an absolute headache for other teams to deal with around the NFL next year as well. You look at the turnovers as well, it's always something. Turnovers kind of come and go, but they checked in at number 18. When you look at the sacks, they checked in, I think, about number 22, 23, something like that. So they were getting pressure on the quarterback, even though they don't have a top edge rusher. When you look at the Jets on defense in 2019, they were good, they were solid. In some areas, they were very good. The yardage result overall, number 7. But I think next year they could really step it up and be even better based on who they got coming back. I want to go straight to the strength of the New York Jets defense, and really, this is such a strength of the defense, it's the strength of the entire team. There's no unit better on the New York Jets right now than safety. These are the safeties right here, starting with Jamal Adams. Okay, this guy is not becoming a star, he is a star. He's an elite player. That's why I gave him the number 1, the grade number 1. This is an absolute elite guy. He's shown it now. For back-to-back seasons, you always wonder after one season if he's really that good or not. This has been 2 seasons in a row he's been that good. He is outstanding in pass coverage. He is really good at getting pressure on the quarterback. He's really good at putting his nose under all the mess and stopping the run. This guy is a star. There's no doubt about it. And at only $7.1 million, he's a steal this season. Season number 4 for him. And, of course, there's no doubt the Jets will be picking up the option on him for 2021. So, really, you've got Jamal Adams for 2 more seasons, an absolute star on defense without having to worry about money, without his cap number being any kind of a burden at all. It's an absolute steal. Combine that, of course, and all Jets fans know about these 2 guys with Marcus May, who isn't, I don't think, an elite player, but is still a very good player. Marcus May now for a couple of seasons has been very good at that safety spot. I think you know what he is now. This is not somebody that you have a lot of questions about. You know what this guy is. He's only making $2.1 million this season. So between these 2 guys, that's $9.2 million you're spending on what you could argue is the best safety tandem in the NFL. Not a lot of people pointed to the Patriots, but the Patriots guys are older. So when you factor in age, Adams and May, they're still on their rookie deals. When you factor in the age, I don't think the Jets would trade their safety combo for any other safety combo in the NFL, even though there might be a couple more that are a little bit more talented. Certainly when you look at the age factor and the money factor, the Jets are paying very little for these 2 young guys, one of whom is a star, the other one is a very good player with May and Adams. Now, at the safety position, and these guys right here, Jackson, Miles, Farley, and Countess, and then these 2 guys, that is your safety spot for the Jets. After that, you don't have any concerns starting at safety, but if you were to get an injury, and I always hesitate to bring up injuries, but the truth is your best players in the NFL are always the most likely to get injured, and the reason for that is they're on the field so much more than the other guys. Your backups tend to be on the field for 200 or 300 snaps a season. your starters. These two guys right here, May played over 1,000 snaps this season. Adams had over 900 snaps, I think 950 snaps this year. So that's a ton of snaps. Your best guys are more likely to get injured. And so you want to have some depth, somebody back there, and you don't have that right now at safety for the Jets. Is it a major concern? No. But it's something that you would like to see the Jets address during this offseason, just in case an injury happens. What you don't want, because when you look at Jackson, Miles, Farley, and Countess, you can call them journeymen and contributors, but that's really testing the meaning of the word journeymen and contributors, okay? These are really not standard backup level safeties, okay? None of these four guys are really the kind of guys who can step in and plug a hole in case of an injury. We didn't have to see them this year. Thankfully, they played very few snaps, 20 and 30 snaps, I think is all about any of these guys played. But if there were an injury next year, you would see a major, massive drop-off in terms of what would be a strength of your team all of a sudden become a major hole on the team for the Jets next season. So I would love to see New York in the offseason pick up somebody in free agency, a guy who's a bit of a veteran. You know that even if you sign a guy for $4, $5, $6 million as a backup at safety for the Jets next season, there's no way he can match the production of May or Adams. But what you're wanting is for there to not be such a drop-off in terms of coverage. You want somebody who can at least step in and kind of, with some experience, plug that hole if there were an injury. So I'd love to see the Jets get somebody here. Jackson, Miles, and Farley are all free agents. It really doesn't matter if you bring them back or not. You're not going to notice the talent difference. Countess, of course, is coming back. The Jets need to put somebody in right there just to add some depth. I don't think they need to spend any draft picks on it. These guys are plenty young enough, but I do think they need to bring in some kind of a veteran right there at safety, sign him to a 1 or 2 year deal, just so there's not such a drop-off in terms of production if there were an injury. When you slide over here to cornerback, there is a lot to talk about at cornerback, so let me spend some time on it, okay? First of all, Poole, Kennedy, Austin, Millette, Roberts, Johnson. When you looked at this unit, the cornerback unit, along with the offensive line, you had to expect that these two units would be by far the worst on the Jets roster this year. And for the offensive line, that was true. The offensive line was bad, one of the worst in football. We covered that on the Offensive Jets video. But the cornerback spot, that was not the case. When you looked at the cornerbacks this year, you had no reason to expect that any of these guys would step up and do anything. None of them ever had, at least not for the Jets. Now, this year, Poole and Kennedy stepped up and had really solid seasons. In fact, Poole was one of the better coverage guys, cornerback-wise, in all of football last year. Okay, he wasn't the best, but he was up there in that top 25 guys of guys who could cover last year, had an outstanding season. He'll be a free agent. Kennedy had a career year as well, not to the extent that Poole had, but Kennedy was very solid in coverage last year. Did he have a bust or two? Yes, he absolutely did, but part of that is just the way the Jets like to play. They play very aggressive. Greg Williams loves to get pressure on the quarterback, and Kennedy proved that he could have a solid season last year, and he did just that. Now, that's the first time he's ever done that, so we're going to come back to that in a minute. Same thing for Austin. Man, you drafted him, I think, in the 5th round. You had no reason to expect that Austin could just step in and play, but he did. He played very solid in coverage. Not perfect, but he played very solid in coverage. And even Millette has contributed. You wouldn't want Millette starting, but Millette stepped up and was pretty solid in coverage this year as well. Now, we've all got visions in our minds of certain plays that broke down, and part of that's just because of the youth of these players and because of the style of the Jets' defense. But these guys as a group, these top 4 guys, and especially Poole and Kennedy, had much better seasons than we had any right or any reason to expect. And I want to throw this in because you see all 4 of these guys had career seasons. I graded Poole as a number 2, as a very good player. These 2 guys got solid starter grades, and even Millette got a solid contributor grade. All 4 of them had better seasons than they've ever had in their whole career. A career year for all 4 of them. And so I think you have to wonder, are these players really that good, or did the coaching staff really step up and have a great season? Now, you didn't see that improvement across the board for the rest of the defense, so you have to wonder, do we credit Greg Williams for the improvement of these players, or do we give the defensive backs coach the credit for this? And so I put down Steve Jackson and Denard Wilson, and you as Jets fans can tell me, when I get on the Jets website and I see who's listed as the defensive backs coach, I see Steve Jackson, I see Denard Wilson as being part of that as well. So you can decide who you want to try to credit for this, but it's a notable fact that you had 4 cornerbacks this year, none of whom who had any reason to believe that they could be outstanding starters in the NFL, and 2 of whom did just exactly that. The third one had a very good season, and even Millette contributed. So when you see that these guys are turning into free agents and you start to want to throw money at them, like, we just can't do without these guys, I would hesitate to do that, considering that all 4 of these guys had career seasons, okay? We've seen this before, a classic example of this, and this is normal in the NFL, but Josh Norman with the Carolina Panthers had a monster 4th season. He was good in the years leading up, but his production in season number 4 really plateaued. I mean, it really jumped and skyrocketed. And all of a sudden, he went from being a corner with a lot of possibilities athletically, he became an absolute star. He goes over to the Redskins for a very large contract, and he has not been the same player since. Washington hasn't gotten anywhere near their value for him ever since he came over to Washington. So that's something to watch out for. Would I be interested in bringing Poole and Kennedy back? Yes. Based on what we saw last season, they had very solid seasons. I would love to bring both of them back. But if I think on free agency they're going to be able to sign contracts for 3 and 4 seasons and be able to make $9, $10, $11, $12 million a season, I do not want to bring them back, because I'm more inclined, truthfully, to give credit to the coaching staff, specifically Williams, Jackson, and Wilson, for that improvement we saw in the cornerbacks this year, than I am to decide, hey, I've got 3 stars here on defense at cornerback, or I've got 2 stars on defense here at cornerback, and to just think, wow, they just all of a sudden showed me what they could do this year. Most of the time, when you see the first 3 or 4 seasons of a player be very average, and all of a sudden their production jumps up that 4th year, in seasons 5, 6, and 7, the production comes all the way back down, closer to what they saw during their first 3 seasons. So that's something to keep in mind when you're trying to decide, do we want to bring these guys back or not? We know Austin's coming back. We know that he's showing some potential already, and you're stuck with Johnson, unfortunately. So here, when you get off of these first 4 players, Roberts this year is going to be making $5.8 million, but my dead cap for him is nothing. If I want to release him, and I do, because his performance the past couple of seasons has not been very good, I would like to let him go. I can save that $5.8 million, and it costs me nothing. There is no dead cap hit. So I'm inclined to think that the Jets will let him go, and that's what I would do if I were the New York Jets. When you come down here to Tremaine Johnson, this is one that really hurts if you're the Jets. He's scheduled to be making $15 million next season. That's a lot of money for any player who's not playing quarterback, okay? Even for a good cornerback, a good cover guy, that's still a healthy amount of salary cap money to be putting out there. Tremaine Johnson's 2 seasons with the Jets have been a disaster. He missed almost all of this season. When he is on the field, he hasn't looked very good for the New York Jets. If you wanted to release him, his dead cap hit is going to be $12 million, okay? So you're only going to save $3 million by letting him go. I don't know which way I would really go with this. I'm inclined to let him go after two really disaster seasons and save my $3 million. But I can certainly see for folks, and I don't know what the Jets are going to do about this. You say, well, we've already got to pay him $12 million. Why not just go ahead and pay $15 to have him on the roster this year? Maybe he'll turn it around. Maybe he'll surprise us. Maybe under the new coaching staff, he'll really step it up and have a great season coming off of this injury. And I could see that either way. But that's what you're stuck with right there with Tremaine Johnson. No matter what, whether he's on the roster or not, you've got to pay him $12 million. And if you do keep him on the roster, then it's going to be $15 million. So that's quite a hit right there. You're really not going to be able to step out of free agency and throw a lot of money at the cornerback spot, because you're already eating so much right here with Tremaine Johnson, okay? So I would really rather see the Jets address this cornerback spot through the draft again, even knowing that they need to address offensive line and probably edge rusher through the draft again as well. So that's what you're looking at cornerback. It's a bit of a mess. You had some players this year who really stepped up, but they all had career years in doing so, and so you would hesitate to throw that kind of money at them, knowing that the three or four guys that stepped up all had career seasons. And then you have these two guys down here who are due a boatload of money, who have done nothing for you in the past 2 seasons, and you can let one of them go with Roberts and save $5.8 million, and the other guy with Johnson you're kind of stuck with no matter what you do. So that's the one that really hurts right there, Johnson, and so that's the cornerback spot. Now, in years gone by, we would talk about the front 7 in football on defense, and that would be the three or four defensive linemen and then the 3 or 4 linebackers. That really is not the case anymore for most teams. And the Jets are not quite like this as much as most teams are, but for most teams, you talk about the back 7 these days. So it is usually 2 linebackers starting these days and 5 defensive backs, and you talk about the back 7, and then the front 4 are all designed to pressure the quarterback and stop the run. For the Jets this year, they were supposed to have C.J. Mosley starting. Now, he's making $17.5 million. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money to give a linebacker. That's a lot of money to give a cornerback. That's a lot of money to give an edge rusher, even for a guy who is really, really good, an elite player. $17.5 million is a lot of money getting soaked into one spot, sucked into one area, and Mosley didn't even get to play this year hardly at all. Okay, now, if Mosley comes back, and if he's healthy, you're going to have the guy that you thought you were going to get in the first place, a guy who can do everything, all right? He's good in pass coverage. He's good at getting to the quarterback. He's good at stopping the run. Mosley can do just about everything. This is a grade 2 player, a very good player. He's an outstanding athlete, but you're going to be paying him to do that, all right? $17.5 million. You can't let him go because the dead cap hit is $30 million. So for those of you who are disenchanted with the signing, like, man, we didn't even get anything out of this guy at all this year. Maybe we don't get anything out of him next year if we don't think he's coming back from injury like he ought to. You better hope he's coming back from injury healthy, because the dead cap hit for him is $30 million. So C.J. Mosley is coming back no matter what. He is guaranteed to come back. You'll be paying him $17.5 million next season. If he comes back healthy and you get the guy that we all saw in Baltimore, then he will really make this defense better. And I think this is one of the reasons you have to hope that this defense is going to get better. Adams and May coming back. You've got enough here at cornerback. If they add another spot, based on what we've seen out of the coaching staff, I think you don't feel bad about corner if they can add a guy. But with a linebacker Mosley coming in, you know the defense surely has to get better with a guy who can do everything like Mosley can. Add into that Avery Williamson. Now, Williamson's making $8.5 million next season, and the dead cap hit for letting him go would only be $2 million next season. Williamson is not a star. He's not a guy who can do just absolutely everything the way Mosley can, to the degree that Mosley can. Williamson still is a very, very good football player. He's a solid starter. This is a guy that you can count on to just step in and be a solid starter. Usually, for a lot of teams, if cap space was an issue, I would think about letting Williamson go, because I could save $6.5 million for that. And if I've got Mosley starting here at linebacker, I have to wonder, do I really want to tie up? And look at the comparison is amazing. I'm going to have about $26 million tied up in 2 linebackers next season between Mosley and Williamson. And with 2 safeties who are even better, I've only got $9.2 million tied up in those guys. So you see the money difference. And so most of the time, if cap space was an issue, I would question the value of having 2 guys, 2 linebackers making $25, $26 million next season. And I would seriously think about letting Williamson go. Cap space is not going to be an issue for the Jets this season, okay? They don't have any major free agents that they need to throw a ton of money at. Matter of fact, they should have somewhere in the neighborhood of $65 million in cap space this offseason. So cap space is really not an issue. I don't see any reason to let Williamson go. I think if you've got Williamson coming back healthy and Mosley coming back healthy, and we'll address the rest of the defense in a second, you got just these 2 guys coming back healthy, if indeed they do. I think you have every right to expect that these defensive numbers can improve, and they can, in fact, not just be a quasi-top 10 defensive unit, but an actual headache unit, and indeed even a bit of a wrecking ball on defense next season, all right? So you've got linebackers who can cover, linebackers who can get pressure on the quarterback to a degree, linebackers who can stop the run, combined with 2 of the best safeties in football. That's an excellent start to a defense. Yes, there's some questions here at cornerback. but I don't think there's any major thing to worry about. I think if you re-sign Poole or Kennedy and then add somebody in the draft right there, I think you're in good shape all through the back seven here. When you switch over here to the interior of the defensive line, this would be the defensive tackles for the most part. And in today's NFL, it gets a little hard to designate defensive tackle, defensive end, and then outside linebacker. These guys switch around so much depending on coverage units and depending on what the play call is. They drop into coverage so much, they blitz so much. I mean, there's so much mixture in the NFL. But these will be the guys we'll classify as defensive tackles for today, interior defensive linemen. This is a solid unit. There is no standout player on this unit, okay? There's no player here, in my opinion, not Williams, the rookie, and not Fatukasi. There's no player here who is an outstanding player, who is a guy destined to be a star in the NFL. But you have four guys here who are very solid players. Very solid rotation, very good together. They're solid against the run. They even provide some pressure on the quarterback. I mentioned it earlier. Everybody right now for the New York Jets is screaming for an edge rusher. Been screaming for an edge rusher for 2 or 3 seasons now. But keep in mind, this was a pretty good defense this year without a top edge rusher. We'll get over to the edge rushers in a second. But these guys here did put some pressure on the quarterback this season. As a matter of fact, the defense as a whole racked up, I think it was 37 sacks this year, which wasn't the best in the NFL. But keep in mind, the Bears and the Ravens both picked up about the same amount of sacks this season, and the Bears and the Ravens both had very good defenses this year, okay? So you don't necessarily, and then the Bears do have a top edge rusher, but you don't necessarily have to have a top edge rusher in order to get pressure on the quarterback. If each of your players, and the Jets have that right here, if each of your players at defensive tackle and defensive end have at least some ability on any given play to try to put pressure on the quarterback as a unit between the scheme and the talent of the players, and the Jets have that, then you can still put together a very good defense, okay? So we'll get to edge rusher in just a minute. Fatukasi, again, had a career season. I think he can continue to be a solid starter. You're only paying him $704,000 this year. It's absolutely nothing. He'll be back. Matter of fact, all 4 of these guys will be back, okay? McClendon had another solid season. We've seen McClendon now for several seasons. He's been pretty solid. He's been pretty good. I think you continue to see that from McClendon. He's making $2.8 million. With Shepard, I don't think Shepard's a guy who's going to be a starter in this league. I wouldn't want Shepard trying to hold down a starting spot. But this guy can contribute. He's a very good part of the rotation, okay? This guy can contribute. He's only making a little over $1 million this season. And then Quentin Williams, of course, the rookie, had a pretty solid season. He was good against the run, not so good against getting pressure on the quarterback. But if you had to, in a season or two, I think Williams is a guy that you feel pretty good about, could step up and grow into a starting spot if you had to. Right now, you don't have to. The Jets are rotating these guys in and out. They're all getting a lot of snaps. None of them are making very much money, 7, 8, 9, 10. You're making about $11 million for all 4 of these players next season, okay? So this is an absolute steal here on the interior of the defensive line to have 4 guys who are solid against the run, solid and getting pressure on the quarterback to a degree for a defensive tackle. These 4 guys making $11 million. You don't have to change a thing here. You don't feel like you have to go out and get somebody in free agency. You don't feel like you have to go and draft a player because you've already spent draft picks on Williams and Fatukasi. I don't remember where McClendon came from. He may have been a draft pick a few years ago as well. You're fine here, okay? So there's no pressure to do anything here. If you happen to stumble over in the draft somebody that you just absolutely love and you feel like you just can't pass up, I would understand that. But at defensive tackle, the interior of the defensive line, you are fine here for the next season. No reason to try to change anything around. Edge rusher, let's talk about that. Almost every media thing that you consult this year, when they talk about the Jets improving or when they talk about the Jets drafting, will scream for an edge rusher. And I understand that because the Jets have not had an elite edge rusher now for quite a while, okay? And would they be better with somebody who has some real talent to get to the quarterback? Yes, absolutely they would. Would I like to see the Jets spend a draft pick on an edge rusher? Yes, I absolutely would. I think the Jets have a first round, a second round, and 2/3 this year. So that's 4 top draft picks this season. And I would love to see them spend 2 of those on the offensive line, 1 of those at cornerback, and one of those edge rusher if I had my way about it. That doesn't always work out. Sometimes guys just aren't there. It's your turn to pick. You've got to pick other positions. Sometimes free agency can change how you think about your draft. Ideally, that's what I would like to see. But if they don't spend anything on draft picks on an edge rusher, Jenkins had a pretty solid season, decent season, but I don't really feel great about him going forward. He's going to be a free agent, and I'm inclined to let him go. Jenkins was fine this year. He's one of those guys who's a fringe starter. You could put him in as a starter, and he wouldn't be hurting and bleeding. You wouldn't be a disaster at defensive end, but he's not a guy I feel good about just leaving out there on an island as a starter. I feel pretty good about him as a rotation. You had a decent rotation here at defensive end. Basham had a very good season. He's only making $778,000 this season. Very, very good value. Basham is not an overtly athletic kind of a defensive end. He's just solid, okay? He's very much like these guys over here. Not a standout, not somebody that you think is ever going to be an all-pro, but he had a good season. He had a good solid season, and I feel pretty good about Phillips and Anderson. Anderson was a bit of a disappointment this season. The problem with Anderson is, and I didn't like it when they threw this much money at him last year. And by the way, for those of you who love free agents, I understand it's very exciting to think about a player coming in who's been good and who's going to improve your team. But the great danger with free agents is if they get injured, like Mosley, then you have a lot of money here sitting on the bench. If they get injured like Johnson, or if they're disappointing like Johnson was before he got injured, you have a lot of money tied up that you can't get out of. And if you sign a guy like Henry Anderson to a lot of money, and listen, Anderson was good the past couple of seasons, but the Jets had other places they could have put the money. They gave quite a bit of money here to Anderson. It's not a boatload, but $8.3 million. He really did not play up to that this year, okay? He was fine. He didn't have a horrible season, but I don't feel good about Anderson being a starter based on what I saw this season, okay? You can't let him go. His dead cap hit is $9.7 million. So when you look at defensive end, Anderson's coming back. I think you'll see him play better next season than you did last season because it'll be a contract year for him. The Jets could get rid of him the next year if they wanted to. But I think you'll see Anderson playing better. Phillips is decent as a contributor. Basham, I feel pretty good about being a starter. Jenkins, I would let go. You would love to see the Jets put in somebody here as an edge rusher, somebody who can get pressure on the quarterback on their own, a younger guy, somebody that they've drafted. Use a first or second round draft pick on that. I would love to see that if they can get it. Now, that's not always available when you're drafting, but I would love to see that happen right here. So we've looked at the entire Jets defense this year, all the players on here. I think safety, no doubt, is a strength. I think the linebacking core, even though you're paying a lot of money for it, I think the linebacking core, those top two linebackers, will make quite a difference here. Burgess and Hewitt, I didn't address them. They ate up a ton of snaps this year. They shouldn't be starting in the NFL. The Jets weren't counting on them being starters in the NFL. I think you could bring Hewitt and Burgess back if you wanted to for very, very low cap hits. Maybe in the $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 range. With all that experience with the system, you'd love to have them back as backups. I think at linebacker, you're going to be very good. At defensive tackle, the interior defense, you're going to be very solid. No worries there. Cornerback, you would love to see them bring in somebody at cornerback, bring in somebody at defensive end. I think with Greg Williams and the guys there, I think all of these numbers can improve next year. I think maybe not the rushing yards per game. I think all of the other numbers can improve this year. All right, that's a lot to throw at you. If you've made it all the way this far in the video, I appreciate you doing that. We'll see you next time. Have a great day. Goodbye.